Yeah. Okay. Parshas Vayeitzei. Um, Rashi, at the beginning of Vayeitzei, mentions the question. It says Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva Vayelech Harana. That Yaakov left Beersheva and he headed and went to Haran. And it's obvious that if he went to Haran, he couldn't have remained in Beersheva. So why did the Torah have to say, Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva Vayelech Harana? He left Beersheva and went to Haran. And Rashi says, cites a medrash, Yitzias Tzaddik Osaroshim, that when the Tzaddik leaves the city or leaves an area, it has an impact on the area. Shekol Zman, Shebizman Shat Tzaddik Be'er, for the time that the righteous person is in the city, Hu Hada, he is its magnificence, the way the English translation translates it. Hu Ziva, he is the splendor. Hu Hadara, he is its grandeur. Yatsa Misham. But if he went out from there, once he left there, Pana Hoda, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara, the glory of the city has left. And so, and then he brings a raya, not a raya. He says, similarly, it's mentioned in regard to Rus, by Nami and Rus, when they left Stay Moab. So also it had that same impact. And the question is, okay, Yaakov is leaving the city, he's leaving the area, had an impact on Beersheva. And that's in spite of the fact that Yitzchak was still there. That was in spite of the fact that the whole community, that Rivka was there. Still, there was the part of the glory of the city left. But the question is, Yaakov is not the first person in the Torah, in Chumash Bereshis, to leave a city. Avram left cities. Yitzchak left cities. Why doesn't the Torah tell us, Vayeitzei Avraham? Avraham left. Why doesn't the Torah tell us that Yitzchak left? And why doesn't, and Yitzias Tzaddik Osaroshem? Certainly Avram was a great tzaddik. Certainly Avram had a great impact on the city, in the areas where he lived. And certainly his leaving those cities, the impact was felt. Why is it only in regard to Yaakov in the Chumash? Vayeitzei Yaakov. Yaakov left. Yitzias Tzaddik Osaroshem. And I think, now last week, I discussed why is it that Yitzchak wanted to give the brachos to Esav instead of Yaakov. And I mentioned that there were two brachos. And Yitzchak wanted to create an alliance, a unity between Yaakov and Esav. And he felt that Yaakov, while Yaakov was a spiritual person, Yaakov was most suited for a spiritual bracha rather than the mundane bracha. The spiritual bracha, v'yitein lecha as birchas Avram. He wanted Yaakov to be the Kohen Gadol personality, the Nasi of Sanhedrin personality, the spiritual leader, the halachic decisor. But he felt that Yaakov lacked leadership skills when it came to the mundane world. And why is it that way? Because to be the leader of the Jewish people, to a certain degree, would be the successor of Avram and Yitzchak. And I mentioned last week, when the Torah presents Avram immediately after the Bris Milah, at the completion of his Jewishness, Avram is Yoshev Pesach HaOel. He is standing outside, close to the tent, close to the entrance, but they're looking for observers, wanting to deal with the outside world, or in a sense, recognizing his responsibility to the outside world, which is so necessary for leadership. And even Yitzchak, who perhaps was more hidden, but the Torah tells us, Vayeitzei Yitzchak l'suach b'sada. It's true, our sages say that l'suach b'sada ain't sicha l'tfilah, but according to the simple explanation of many of the Mefarshim, l'suach b'sada can mean that he went out to the fields to see how the workers were working in the fields, to check on them. He wasn't involved, perhaps in a more limited way, in mundane matters as well. And I've seen a pshat l'suach is connected with the Aramaic word of sicha, to talk with the people in the fields. But when the Torah describes Yaakov Avinu is Yoshev Olim. He is a person of the tents. And some even suggest the tents in Lashon Rabbim. It's the tents of Shem Ve'aver. He was involved in the tent of Torah. And he felt while Yaakov had this spiritual personality, he was totally removed from the mundane world. And because he was removed from the mundane world, he couldn't be the example of a leader. Of a spiritual leader, he could be an example, but of a mundane leader, and the symbolized in future generations by the Melech Yisrael, by the king of the Jewish people, he was too removed from that. You can call it too holy for that. But so because of that, he wanted to create an alliance where Yaakov would be the spiritual leader and Esav would be the mundane leader. But Rivka understood, and perhaps through Ruach HaKodesh, and perhaps based on from the message that she got from Shem, according to Chazal, during her pregnancy, when she went to inquire the message of Vayisrotzatzu Habanim B'kirba, she understood that there couldn't be an alliance between Yaakov and Esav. But in any case, certainly up to that point, Yaakov was a Yoshev Olim, a very private person. He was in his tent. He didn't mix. He didn't go out. And one would think that when one doesn't go out, his impact is somewhat limited. And to a large degree, it is limited. Because you don't see him as much. He's not the center of attention. Matter of fact, there was an expression very often used about people sitting and learning. They used to refer to them as batlonim. And the truth of the matter is, there is a basis for that. In the Gemara, when the Gemara talks about the Asara batlonim, people have the impression that they weren't doing anything. So I think that this is what Rashi is trying to tell us, that the Torah is trying to tell us. Yitzias Tzaddik Osaroshim. We have two types of tzaddikim. We have the tzaddik like Avram, as the Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah describes it. He would go from town to town. He would give speeches. He would talk. He would talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He would talk against idolatry, against Avodah Zarah, against immorality. He would talk about chesed. And it wasn't just talk. He demonstrated it, not demonstration as an act, which is so popular today, but demonstration of who he really was. As I mentioned, in my father's name, Laman Ashiyat Savez, Bana Vespeso Achrab, Veshamru Derech Hashem, he commands his children, Achrab, not only to act when he is no longer there, how to act when he passes away, but Achrab by his example. And Avram, to a large degree, was a universal figure. And perhaps that could explain why there was a necessity for him, even after his bris milah, to marry Keturah. Even though Keturah certainly was Hagar, and she certainly went through Geras at a certain point, but nevertheless, her children, although they might be considered part of Beis Avram, there is a requirement of milah for them. And according to some opinions, even for generations, according to other opinions, only the first generation. But it was important, I think, for Avram to be recognized as a universal figure. And because Keturah's children were not considered, even according to the Rambam's opinion, that Keturah's children required, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, for all generations, required a form of bris milah. But they were not Jewish. Ki v'Yitzchak yikar l'chazara. From Yitzchak will be your descendants. Those who are from Hagar, those who are from Turah, and those who are from the Plakshim, all kinds of discussion who the Plakshim were. They are not considered, the descendants are not considered the Zera Avram. They're not considered the seed of Avram Avinu. But nevertheless, there is an identification. Avram is their biological ancestor. And perhaps this is to maintain that on one hand, Avram goes to Geras. He disassociates himself from his past. He fulfills in the fullest sense. He separates himself from his father's house, not just physically, not just by moving out, but emotionally, psychologically as well. But nevertheless, he is a universal figure. And he felt a spiritual responsibility for every human being. And Yitzchak also, Vayeitzei Yitzchak l'suach b'sada, not in the universal sense that Abraham did, but he would go out from time to time. Yes, he was to a large degree a Yoshev Olam also, but Vayeitzei Yitzchak, he would go out to talk to people. So people recognized who he was. But Yaakov was a Yoshev Olam. So people did not recognize the impact he had on them. But these type of people do have an impact. And because they have an impact, when is this impact recognized? The impact is recognized when they're no longer there. So this is why the Torah tells us by Yitzchak, by Yaakov, Vayeitzei Yaakov. The Torah didn't have to tell it to us by Abraham. By Abraham, everybody recognized the impact. By Yitzchak too, people recognized the impact that they had. By Yaakov in his earlier years, the Torah had to tell it to us. Now but even so, different situations demand different responses. There are times when it's okay to be a Yoshev Olam. But there are times when a person has to take action. A person has to leave the ohel also. Mordechai said to Esther, Milo yodeim lo ke'eis hazos higat lamalchus. There is a different situation. The Jewish people are in trouble. And you can't treat the situation the way you treat it, the way you act every day. And yes, there are sacrifices that have to be made. But the survival of the Jewish people, your responsibility towards the survival of the Jewish people, demand that you act differently today. And throughout Jewish history, there are moments with different individuals that echoes the same message to us. In a sense, when Yaakov is given the Birchas Avram, when he is becoming the successor, and he can't have a joint alliance with Esav, and to assure that other Esavs do not come and do the damage that Esav attempted to do or would have attempted to do. Yaakov has to leave the ohel. And in a sense, that is the message in this week's Sedra. But I want to discuss different pshatim. The Nehinei Malachi Elokim Olim V'Yardim. According to some Medrashim, it was the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael that were Olim. They were the ones who guarded Yaakov in Eretz Yisrael. But now that Yaakov was going to Chutz La'aretz, going to Haran, he needed different Malachim. And perhaps the different Malachim is indicative of the different approaches in the different situations. When he was in Eretz Yisrael, he was in the community that was built by his grandfather Abraham and by his father Yitzchak. But now that he was going to Haran, it demanded a change in approach. And that's the idea of different malachim, perhaps. And another possible approach is that perhaps the malachim olim, malachim yordim, because this is the point where Yitzchak was mispalel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where Yaakov, David HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He had an encounter. He had an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayifka b'makom. He had an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Makom not only means the place, but makom is the name of one of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the idea of making a connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God. Reb Chaim points out in Hilchos Tefillah that the essence of Tefillah is recognition that I'm standing before God, having a communication with God, expressing thoughts to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, requests of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, that's the response, that he should understand what tefillah is. The Malach Elokim on one hand that are Olim are the ones carrying up the tefillahs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Slichas, we talk about the Malachim who bring the tears of the Jewish people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Malachim coming down is the Shlichim, the agents of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are coming down to respond to our tefillahs, to help us in our time of trouble. Sorrow is the mechayev of tefillah, but man is always in sorrow, as my uncle, my father would say. So, but as the Rambam points out, there are many pshatim. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, I'm going to discuss it in a minute, mentions a pshat. The Rambam in Yad HaChazaka mentions a pshat. And he was asked, you mentioned two different pshatim, two different explanations. The Rambam's response was that both explanations are true. Certain dreams have many meanings in them. And the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says the Malach Elokim represent the Nevi'im, represent the prophets. And a prophet initially has to climb the ladder of perfection. He has to perfect himself. He has to go up to heaven. But after going up to heaven, after figuratively going up to heaven and perfecting himself, he has a responsibility to go back down to earth to fulfill his mission. The A malach is an agent of God, a shliach, a messenger of God. And the Nevi'im and the prophets are also agents of God, messengers of God. And why was this message given to Yaakov at this point? I think that perhaps it was a message, Avram, Yaakov, up till this point you were Yoshev Olim, but now it's time for you to climb down the ladder, to leave the tent, to fulfill your mission. But to serve as an example for the leaders of the future generations of the Jewish people. Yes, they should perfect themselves spiritually, but they also have to leave. They have to leave their tent to fulfill their mission. And it's not easy for somebody who perfected themselves, that were a Yoshev Olim, to step out of the tent, to climb down the ladder. But that is the challenge. That sometimes, based on the situation that one encounters, that a person understands, without the popular perception of Malachim, the main task of Malachim. When we think about the Malachim, we think of heavenly beings, people who are singing Shir HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the heavens. And even as the Malach who had this struggle, Shalchuni ki Allah HaShachar, I have to go up to sing Shir HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the main task of the Malach is not so much the going up the ladder as climbing down the ladder, to be the agent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be the messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I want to suggest something else. There are those who are sitting and learning in the Beis Medrash. And I'm not going to advocate that they be pushed out of the Beis Medrash. But those who are fighting the war, those who left the Beis Medrash and took up arms to defend Klal Yisrael, could be figuratively seen as the Malachei Elokim that were Yordim, who are accomplishing the greater task, the goal of the angels, of the messengers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the agent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mentioned many times what my uncle said based on what Reb Chaim said, that Milchemes Yisrael miyatzor sheba aleihem. Where is that mitzvah contained? It's called the Milchemes mitzvah. Milchama la'Hashem ba'amalek midor dor. A war for God. In every generation, we don't have a war against the nation of Amalek. But in every generation, b'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chaloseinu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzileinu biyadam. God saves us from their hands. But who is the malach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends? Or better than that, who are the malachim that respond and become the soldiers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? in the war of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Milchama Hashem. Those are those who climbed down the ladder, that took up arms, that temporarily climbed down the ladder, and very often they climb down the ladder with their Gemaras and with their Sfarim. Very often, when we see, unfortunately, so many of them have been killed, and they show pictures in the newspapers, you see them dressed in their uniforms, sitting and learning Gemara. It's much more difficult to take a picture when they're fighting. But when they're sitting and learning, then they might not even be aware that a picture is being taken of them. So these are the malachim, those who answer the call of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who respond, who go down the ladder on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And they're the ones, now Yaakov Avinu, in dealing with the outside world, he had to deal with the Lavans, he had to deal with the Esavs. And they are the ones that are dealing with the Lavans and the Esavs. And it's interesting that by Shechem, when the Jewish people, when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the leader of the town of Shechem, raped Dinah, so Shimon and Levi led the brothers to wipe out the city of Shechem. And the Rambam raises the question, what was the heter that the brothers had to wipe out the city of Shechem? And the Rambam says the heter was because there is a halach of dinim. One of the Shiva b'nei mitzvos b'nei Noach is dinim. And according to the Rambam, dinim means enforcing the observance of the Shiva mitzvos b'nei Noach, enforcing the observance of the 7 mitzvos. And if one doesn't observe the 7 mitzvos, Beis Din or their court system has the right, in order to enforce the observance, where it's necessary, to even use capital punishment. And the people of Shechem not only didn't take action against Shechem for raping Dinah, but the people of Shechem actually gave him support. And consequently, the people of Shechem were chayav misa themselves. They committed a capital offense. And the Ramban questions the Rambam. He said, if that's the case, so why is it that Yaakov was critical of them, not just here, but he was critical of them later on in Parshas Vayeitzei? And also he said that if they needed an excuse to kill the people of Shechem, so they were all over at Avodah Zarah, they all had a chiyuv misa in any case. And my father, in explaining the Ramban, suggests that there is a difference between the punishments by the Jewish people when they commit an offense, whether it's a capital offense or another offense. and the halacha of punishment by the Umos Olam, by the nations of the world, when it comes to the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, the 7 mitzvos of B'nai Noach. When it comes to the Jewish people, yes, part of the punishment is as a preventive measure. That people should see, people should recognize that there is punishment for violation of the Torah. But part of the reason is that it serves as a kapara. It serves as an atonement by the Umos Olam, by the nations of the world. The main purpose of the punishment is to enforce the observance of the 7 mitzvahs. And even though the person committed a capital offense, the court system, if a lesser penalty would be effective, they are not required, my father suggested, to punish with as a full capital offense. And my father felt that here, certainly in dealing with the people of the town of Shechem, yes, they committed an offense. Shechem violated one of the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach when he raped Dinah. But the people wanted to ignore it. They even gave it support. Just like the UN inspectors on October 7th, who went into the villages, to the settlements, the Jewish settlements, when Hamas killed, murdered, and raped the Jewish people. But these people, but my father felt that in regard to the people of Shechem, that certainly isn't the true case here, but that a lesser in dealing with the people of Shechem who gave support to Shechem, in spite of the crime that he committed against Dinah, they could have fulfilled the goal of punishment with lesser penalties. And consequently, Yaakov was angry at them. And now, however, it wasn't considered murder because the people of Shechem were chayiv misa. They committed a capital offense, and when it was necessary, the Bezdin could. The Bezdin is only required to give the minimum punishment that would enforce the law. But if they give the maximum punishment, it wouldn't be considered murder either. That's how my father explained the Shita of the Rambam. I want to explain it a little differently. I want to explain the people, the Bnei Yaakov, the sons of Yaakov, were not part of the city of Shechem. They happened to be residing there or temporarily staying there as part of their journey. So the responsibility, they bore no responsibility for what the people of Shechem did. However, the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, on one hand, from the perspective of Dinim, is a law on the people of the community to enforce the observance of the 7 mitzvos in their community. But outsiders don't have that responsibility. But outsiders might have the responsibility of using using punishment that they deserve, that those who violate the 7 mitzvos deserve, in order to protect themselves. And if you take a look at the Chumash, that is what Yaakov was saying to them. Yaakov was saying, what form of protection is this? What right did you have to go in to kill them? You're not members of the city. But what right did you have to go in to kill them? What right did you have to go to wage war against the people of Shechem? The only right you had is because to protect yourself. But the people from the surrounding cities and the surrounding villages who see what you did, they will rise up against us. And who knows if we will be successful in defending ourselves. Ichartamosi. You have made us the enemy. And they will rise up against us. And according to the Ramban, there was a certain medrash. The Ramban has some question about the authenticity of the medrash, but he seems inclined to accept it. That they did, the people of the surrounding areas rose up and waged war against Yaakov and his sons. Yaakov and his sons were successful in overcoming that battle. But at that point, they didn't know for sure that that would happen. And what was the response of the brothers of Yaakov, and especially of Shimon the Levi? Hachazona yases hachasenu. Should our sister be like a harlot? If these people are able to get away with it, so many more will try to do these type of things. We have to protect ourselves. And the Shiva Mitzvos, the punishment for the non-observance of the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, and it's specifically for the dinim of enforcing the observance, is not only the responsibility of the community that commits that offense, but it's the responsibility of the people to protect themselves. The only argument between Yaakov and Shimon Levi and his sons was the question is, what is considered protection? But they all agreed that there is a responsibility to protect themselves. Yaakov just felt that under these circumstances, this was not real protection. Yes, it will protect them on one hand. On the other hand, it might cause a greater danger. And I think now that there are all kinds of proposals being considered and being accepted, and people are getting angry on both sides, I think it's important to remember, yes, we have a responsibility to protect ourselves. And when we talk about protecting ourselves, we are not talking just about protecting ourselves today, but we're talking about protecting ourselves tomorrow for our children and our grandchildren as well. That's part of our responsibility. And we know from the past that every time we gave in and we limited our response, there was another offense not always by the same people, but always by the people that identify together with the original group. I mentioned that I mentioned many times that when Eichmann received the death penalty, I asked my father, Eichmann no longer has the ability to kill Jews. Yes, he deserves to die. He deserves more than that. Die a 6 million times. But could he halachically now be considered a rodef? And my father told me that the Achronim say that when people in European towns, from time to time, groups of non-Jews, of anti-Semites, would gather together and go at random killing the Jews of the town. As Golda Meir mentioned to the Pope at one time, to remind him about it. When we have in our hands, and without endangering ourselves, the leaders of that movement, we are required, we can kill them. Because so long as they're alive, they'll continue being alive after murdering men, women, and children. Their survival inspires others to follow in their path. So they remain rotfim. They remain murderers. And we could say that when we are the victims of the non-observance of the Shibbos B'nai Noach, the same thing applies. And that's what they said, Hachazona Yasas Achasenu. Should our sister be considered like a harlot? If we let them get away this time, they're going to come back again. And if they don't come back again, others will come back because of the inspired by what Shechem did. But an evaluation has to be made to determine what is the greatest sakana, what is the greater danger. I really don't think that most of the people publicly expressing different opinions are knowledgeable enough regarding the military situation. And of course, it has to be evaluated both from a military perspective as well as a diplomatic perspective to make a decision on this question. But those in the Israeli government who certainly have demonstrated that they recognize that this time is different, that this situation is different, and they have demonstrated that they're not going to submit at the expense of the lives of other Jews, and they're not going to make the mistake that was made time and time again. That we have to rely on their judgment, because they are in a better position to evaluate, both from a military perspective and a diplomatic perspective, what is the greater danger. And as we enter Chodesh Kislev, we have to remember that Chodesh Kislev is identified with the response of the Chashmonaim to those who attacked the Jewish people, those who treated Jewish daughters as they were hefker, And while it might be true, as the Ramban points out, that they made certain mistakes, their response saved Klal Yisrael and Torah Hashem, and the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Klal Yisrael. And we have to hope that their example, which Chodesh Kislev is identified with, will inspire the Jews of our generation who so fervently celebrate Hanukkah, which is expressive of the fruits of the accomplishment of the Chashmonayim, to recognize the accomplishment of the Chashmonayim of our generation, the soldiers of the Israeli army who are giving their lives to save all of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, as well as the Jewish people of Chutz La'aretz, the Jewish people who are outside the Beis Medrash, as well as the Jewish people who are inside the Beis Medrash. It's not just a question of Hakaras Tov. We have to recognize that they are acting. They are acting as the Malachim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They are fighting the Milchemes Hashem. Milchema LaHashem Ba'amolek Midor Dor.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat.